There are studies done on the frequency with which individuals engage in the conjugal act, as broken down by male, female, introvert, extrovert. So I ask you, how many times per minute? Oh, I'm sorry, that was a rat study. How many times per month do introverted men engage in the act? A 3.0. Extroverted men, more or less? Yes, more. 5.5, almost twice as much. Introverted women, 3.1. Extroverted women, frankly, speaking as an introverted male, which I will explain later, they are heroic. 7.5, they not only handle all the male extroverts, they pick up a few introverts as well. We communicate differently, extroverts and introverts. Extroverts, when they interact, want to have lots of social encounter punctuated by closeness. They like to stand close for comfortable communication. They like to have a lot of eye contact or mutual gaze. We found in some research that they use more diminutive terms when they meet somebody. So when an extrovert meets Charles, it rapidly becomes Charlie, and then Chuck, and then Chuckles baby. Whereas for introverts, it remains Charles until he has given a pass to be more intimate by the person he's talking to. We speak differently. Extroverts prefer black and white, concrete, simple language. Introverts prefer, and I must again tell you that I am as extreme an introvert as you could possibly imagine. We speak differently. We prefer contextually complex, contingent, weasel word sentences, more or less, as it were, not to put too fine a point upon it, like that. When we talk, we sometimes talk past each other. I had a consulting contract I shared with a colleague who was as different from me as two people can possibly be. First, his name is Tom. Mine isn't. Secondly, he's 6'5". I have a tendency not to be. And thirdly, he's as extroverted a person as you could find. I am seriously introverted. I overload so much I can't even have a cup of coffee after 3 in the afternoon and expect to sleep in the evening. We had seconded to this project a fellow called Michael. And Michael almost brought the project to a crashing halt. So the person who seconded him asked Tom and me, "What do you make of Michael?" Well, I'll tell you what Tom said in a minute. He spoke in classic extrovertese. And here is how extroverted ears heard what I said, which is actually pretty accurate. I said, well, Michael does have a tendency at times of behaving in a way that some of us might see as perhaps more assertive than is normally called for. Tom rolled his eyes and he said, "Brian, that's what I said. He's an asshole." Now, as an introvert, I might gently allude to certain assholic qualities in this man's behavior, but I'm not going to lunge for the A word. But the extrovert says if he walks like one, if he talks like one, I call him one, and we go past each other. Now, is this something that we should be heedful of? Of course, it's important that we know this. Is that all we are? Are we just a bunch of traits? No, we're not. Remember, you're like some other people and like no other person. How about that idiosyncratic you? As Elizabeth or as George, you may share your extroversion or your neuroticism. But are there some distinctively Elizabethan features of your behavior or Georgian of yours that makes us understand you better than just a bunch of traits that make us love you, not just because you're a certain type of person. I'm uncomfortable putting people in pigeonholes. I don't even think pigeons belong in pigeonholes. So what is it that makes us different? It's the doings that we have in our life, the personal projects. You have a personal project right now, but nobody may know it here. It relates to your kid. You've been back 3 times to the hospital and they still don't know what's wrong. Or it could be your mom. And you've been acting out of character. These are free traits. You're very agreeable, but you act disagreeably in order to break down those barriers of administrative torpor in the hospital to get something for your mom or your child. What are these free traits? They're where we enact a script in order to advance a core project in our lives. And they are what matters. Don't ask people what type you are. Ask them, what are your core projects in your life? And we enact those free traits. I'm an introvert, but I have a core project, which is to profess. I'm a professor. And I adore my students, and I adore my field. And I can't wait to tell them about what's new, what's exciting, what I can't wait to tell them about. And so I act in an extroverted way because at 8 in the morning, the students need a little bit of humor, a little bit of engagement to keep them going in arduous days of study. But we need to be very careful when we act protractedly out of character. Sometimes we may find that we don't take care of ourselves. I find, for example, after a period of pseudo-extroverted behavior, I need to repair somewhere on my own. As Susan Cain said in her Quiet book, in a chapter that featured this strange Canadian professor who was teaching at the time at Harvard, I sometimes go to the men's room to escape the slings and arrows of outrageous extroverts. I remember one particular day when I was retired to a cubicle trying to avoid overstimulation. And a real extrovert came in beside me, not right in my cubicle, but in the next cubicle over. And I could hear various evacuatory noises, which we hate, even our own. That's why we flush during as well as after. And then I heard this gravelly voice saying, "Hey, is that Dr. Little?" If anything is guaranteed to constipate an introvert for 6 months, is talking on the John. That's where I'm going now. Don't follow me. Thank you.
Canon.
Để cậu chiếc xe đi em ơi.
Mất mạng rồi. Cứu mạng.
ST15K giá quá hời, có mạng mọi lúc mọi nơi. Bấm gọi sao 098 sao 3 thăng để đăng ký thoải mái data chỉ 15K.
So in college, I was a government major, which means I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. So, you get started maybe a little slowly, but you get enough done in the first week that with some heavier days later on, everything gets done and things stay civil. And I would want to do that like that. That would be the plan. I would I would have it all ready to go, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. And that would happen every single paper. But then came my 90-page senior thesis, a paper you're supposed to spend a year on. I knew for a paper like that, my normal workflow was not an option. It was way too big a project. So I planned things out, and I decided I kind of had to go something like this. This is how the year would go. So I'd start off light, and I'd bump it up in the middle months. And then at the end, I would kick it up into high gear. It's just like a little staircase. How hard could it be to just walk up the stairs? No big deal, right? But then, funniest thing happened. Those first few months, they came and went, and I couldn't quite do stuff. So we had an awesome new revised plan. But then those middle months actually went by, and I didn't really write words. And so we were here. And then 2 months turned into 1 month, which turned into 2 weeks. And one day I woke up with 3 days until the deadline, still not having written a word, and so I did the only thing I could. I wrote 90 pages over 72 hours, pulling not 1 but 2 all-nighters. Humans are not supposed to pull 2 all-nighters. Sprinted across campus, dove in slow motion, and got it in just at the deadline. I thought that was the end of everything. But a week later, I get a call. And it's the school. And they say, "Is this Tim Urban?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "We need to talk about your thesis." I say, "Okay." And they say, "It's the best one we've ever seen." That did not happen. It was a very, very bad thesis. I just wanted to enjoy that one moment when all of you thought, "This guy is amazing." No, it was very, very bad. Anyway, today I'm a writer, blogger guy. I write the blog Wait, But Why? And a couple of years ago, I decided to write about procrastination. My behavior has always perplexed the non-procrastinators around me, and I wanted to explain to the non-procrastinators of the world what goes on in the heads of procrastinators and why we are the way we are. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. And to test this, I found an MRI lab that actually let me scan both my brain and the brain of a proven non-procrastinator, so I could compare them, and I actually brought them here to show you today, and I want you to take a look carefully to see if you can notice a difference. And I know that if you're not a trained brain expert, it's not that obvious, but just take a look, okay? So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, it means everything's fine until this happens. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel, and he says, "Actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened." Then we're gonna go over to the fridge, we're gonna see if there's anything new in there since 10 minutes ago. After that, we're gonna go on a YouTube spiral that starts with videos of Richard Feynman talking about magnets and ends much, much later with us watching interviews with Justin Bieber's mom. All of that's gonna take a while, so we're not gonna really have room on the schedule for any work today, sorry. Now, what is going on here? The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He has no memory of the past, no knowledge of the future, and he only cares about 2 things: easy and fun. Now, in the animal world, that works fine. If you're a dog and you spend your whole life doing nothing other than easy and fun things, you're a huge success. And to the monkey, humans are just another animal species. He has to keep well slept, well fed, and propagating into the next generation. which in tribal times might have worked okay. But if you haven't noticed, now we're not in tribal times. We're in an advanced civilization, and the monkey does not know what that is, which is why we have another guy in our brain, the rational decision maker, who gives us the ability to do things no other animal can do. We can visualize the future. We can see the big picture. We can make long-term plans. And he wants to take all of that into account. And he wants to just have us do whatever makes sense to be doing right now. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, like when you're having dinner or going to bed or enjoying well-earned leisure time. That's why there's an overlap. Sometimes they agree. But other times, it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. And for the procrastinator, that conflict tends to end a certain way every time, leaving him spending a lot of time in this orange zone, an easy and fun place that's entirely out of the makes sense circle. I call it the dark playground. Now, the dark playground is a place that all of you procrastinators out there know very well. It's where leisure activities happen at times when leisure activities are not supposed to be happening. The fun you have in the dark playground isn't actually fun because it's completely unearned and the air is filled with guilt, dread, anxiety, self-hatred, all those good procrastinator feelings. And the question is, in this situation with the monkey behind the wheel, how does the procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone? A less pleasant place, but where really important things happen. Well, turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone who's always looking down on him and watching over him in his darkest moments, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. And importantly, he's the only thing that the monkey is terrified of. Now, he became very relevant in my life pretty recently because the people of TED reached out to me about 6 months ago and invited me to do a TED Talk. Now, of course, I said yes. It's always been a dream of mine to have done a TED Talk in the past. But in the middle of all this excitement, the rational decision maker seemed to have something else in his mind. He was saying, are we clear on what we just accepted? Do we get what's going to be now happening one day in the future? We need to sit down and work on this right now. And the monkey said, totally agree, but also let's just open Google Earth and let's zoom into the bottom of India, like 200 feet above the ground, and we're gonna scroll up for 2.5 hours till we get to the top of the country so we can get a better feel for India. So that's what we did that day. As 6 months turned into 4, and then 2, and then 1, the people of TED decided to release the speakers. And I opened up the website, and there was my face staring right back at me, and guess who woke up? So the panic monster starts losing his mind, and a few seconds later, the whole system's in mayhem. And the monkey, who, remember, he's terrified of the panic monster, boom, he's up the tree. And finally, the rational decision maker can take the wheel and I can start working on the talk. Now, the panic monster explains all kinds of pretty insane procrastinated behavior, like how someone like me could spend 2 weeks unable to start the opening sentence of a paper and then miraculously find the unbelievable work ethic to stay up all night and write 8 pages. And this entire situation with the 3 characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works. And this is what I decided to write about on the blog just a couple years ago. Now, when I did, I was amazed by the response. Literally thousands of emails came in from all different kinds of people, from all over the world, doing all different kinds of things. These were people who were nurses and bankers and painters and engineers and lots of PhD students. And they were all writing saying the same thing. I have this problem too. But what struck me was the contrast between the light tone of the post and the heaviness of these emails. these people were writing with intense frustration about what procrastination had done to their lives, about what this monkey had done to them. And I thought about this, and I said, well, if the procrastinator system works, then what's going on? Why are all these people in such a dark place? Well, it turns out that there's two kinds of procrastination. Everything I've talked about today, the examples I've given, they all have deadlines. And when there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained to the short term because the panic monster gets involved. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first because nothing's happening at first, not until you've gone out and done the hard work to get some momentum, to get things going. There's also all kinds of important things outside of your career that don't involve any deadlines, like seeing your family or exercising and taking care of your health, working on your relationship or getting out of a relationship that isn't working. Now, if procrastinator's only mechanism of doing these hard things is the panic monster, that's a problem because in all of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. He has nothing to wake up for. So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained. They just extend outward forever. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and much less talked about than the funnier, short-term, deadline-based kind. It's usually suffered quietly and privately, and it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness and regrets. And I thought, that's why these people are emailing, and that's why they're in such a bad place. It's not that they're cramming for some project. It's that long-term procrastination has made them feel like a spectator at times in their own lives. The frustration was not that they couldn't achieve their dreams, it's that they weren't even able to start chasing them. So I read these emails and I had a little bit of an epiphany that I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right, I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us, and some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. Now, I want to show you one last thing. I call this a life calendar. That's one box for every week of a 90-year life. That's not that many boxes, especially since we've already used a bunch of those. So I think we need to all take a long, hard look at that calendar. We need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because everyone is procrastinating on something in life. We need to stay aware of the instant gratification monkey. That's a job for all of us. And because there's not that many boxes on there, it's a job that should probably start today. Well, maybe not today, but sometime soon. Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is Chi. I'm 22 years old and currently I'm working as an English teacher in Hanoi. So today I want to share with you my journey to achieve good English.
Hi everyone. 2 years ago, my life changed forever. My wife Kelsey and I welcomed our daughter Leela into the world. Now, becoming a parent is an amazing, amazing experience. Your whole world changes overnight, and all of your priorities change immediately, so fast that it makes it really difficult to process sometimes. Now, you also have to learn a tremendous amount about being a parent, like, for example, how to dress your child. This was new to me. This is an actual outfit. I thought this was a good idea. And even Leela knows that it's not a good idea. So there was so much to learn and so much craziness all at once. And to add to the craziness, Kelsey and I both work from home. We're entrepreneurs. We run our own businesses. So Kelsey develops courses online for yoga teachers. I'm an author. And so I'm working from home. Kelsey's working from home. We have an infant, and we're trying to make sure that everything gets done that needs done. And life is really, really, really busy. And a couple weeks into this amazing experience, when the sleep deprivation really kicked in, like around week 8, I had this thought, and it was the same thought that parents across the ages internationally, everybody has had this thought, which is, I am never going to have free time ever again. And somebody said it's true. Yeah, it's not exactly true, but it feels really, really true in that moment. And this was really disconcerting to me, because one of the things that I enjoy more than anything else is learning new things. Getting curious about something and diving in and fiddling around and learning through trial and error and eventually becoming pretty good at something. And without this free time, I didn't know how I was ever going to do that ever again. And so I'm a big geek. I want to keep learning things. I want to keep growing. And so what I decided to do was go to the library and go to the bookstore and look at what research says about how we learn and how we learn quickly. And I read a bunch of books, I read a bunch of websites, and trying to answer this question, how long does it take to acquire a new skill? You know what I found? 10,000 hours. Anybody ever heard this? 10,000, it takes 10,000 hours. If you want to learn something new, if you want to be good at it, it's going to take 10,000 hours to get there. And I read this in book after book and website after website, and my mental experience of reading all of this stuff was like, no, I don't have time. I don't have 10,000 hours. I am never going to be able to learn anything new ever again. But that's not true. So 10,000 hours, just to give you a rough order of magnitude, 10,000 hours is a full-time job for 5 years. That's a long time. And we've all had the experience of learning something new, and it didn't take us anywhere close to that amount of time, right? So what's up? There's something kind of funky going on here. What the research says and what we expect and have experiences, they don't match up. And what I found, here's the wrinkle. The 10,000 hour rule came out of studies of expert level performance. There was a professor at Florida State University. His name is K. Anders Ericsson. He's the originator of the 10,000 hour rule. And where that came from is he studied professional athletes, world-class musicians, chess grandmasters, all of these ultra-competitive folks in ultra-high-performing fields, and he tried to figure out how long does it take to get to the top of those kinds of fields. And what he found is the more deliberate practice, the more time that those individuals spent practicing the elements, whatever it is that they do, the more time you spend, the better you get. And the folks at the tippy top of their fields put in around 10,000 hours of practice. Now, we were talking about the game of telephone a little bit earlier. Here's what happened. An author by the name of Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book in 2007 called Outliers, the Story of Success. And the centerpiece of that book was the 10,000 hour rule. Practice a lot, practice well, and you will do extremely well. You reach the top of your field. So the message, what Dr. Ericsson was actually saying is, it takes 10,000 hours to get to the top of an ultra-competitive field in a very narrow subject. That's what that means. But here's what happened. Ever since Outliers came out, immediately came out, reached the top of the bestseller list, stayed there for 3 solid months. All of a sudden, the 10,000 hour rule was everywhere. And a society-wide game of telephone started to be played. So this message, it takes 10,000 hours to reach the top of an ultra-competitive field, became, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. which became, it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something, which became, it takes 10,000 hours to learn something. But that last statement, it takes 10,000 hours to learn something, it's not true. It's not true. So, what the research actually says, if I spend a lot of time here at the CSU library in the cognitive psychology stacks, because I'm a geek. And when you actually look at the studies of skill acquisition, you see over and over and over a graph like this. Now, researchers, whether they're studying a motor skill, something you do physically, or a mental skill, they like to study things that they can time, because you can quantify that, right? So they'll give research participants a little task, something that requires physical arrangement or something that requires learning a little mental trick, and they'll time how long a participant takes to complete the skill. And here's what this graph says. When you start, so when researchers gave participants a task, it took them a really long time because it was new and they were horrible. With a little bit of practice, they get better and better and better, and that early part of practice is really, really efficient. People get good at things with just a little bit of practice. Now, what's interesting to note is that if, we don't really, for skills that we want to learn for ourselves, we don't care so much about time, right? We just care about how good we are, whatever good happens to mean. So if we relabel performance time to how good you are, the graph flips, and you get this famous and widely known, this is the learning curve. And the story of the learning curve is when you start, you're grossly incompetent and you know it, right? With a little bit of practice, you get really good really quick. So that early level of improvement is really fast. And then at a certain point, you reach a plateau, and the subsequent gains become much harder to get. They take more time to get. Now, my question is, I want that, right? How long does it take from starting something and being grossly incompetent and knowing it to being reasonably good in, hopefully, as short a period of time as possible? So, how long does that take? Here's what my research says. 20 hours. That's it. You can go from knowing nothing about any skill that you can think of. Want to learn a language? Want to learn how to draw? Want to learn how to juggle flaming chainsaws? If you put 20 hours of focused, deliberate practice into that thing, you will be astounded at how good you are. 20 hours is doable. That's about 45 minutes a day for about a month, even skipping a couple days here and there. 20 hours isn't that hard to accumulate. Now, there's a method to doing this, because it's not like you can just start fiddling around for about 20 hours and expect these massive improvements. There's a way to practice intelligently. There's a way to practice efficiently that will make sure that you invest those 20 hours in the most effective way that you possibly can. And here's the method. It applies to anything. The first is to deconstruct the skill. Decide exactly what you want to be able to do when you're done, and then look into the skill and break it down into smaller and smaller pieces. Most of the things that we think of as skills are actually big bundles of skills that require all sorts of different things. The more you can break apart the skill, the more you're able to decide what are the parts of this skill that will actually help me get to what I want, and then you can practice those first. And if you practice the most important things first, you'll be able to improve your performance in the least amount of time possible. The second is learn enough to self-correct. So get 3 to 5 resources about what it is you're trying to learn. Could be books, could be DVDs, could be courses, could be anything. But don't use those as a way to procrastinate on practice. I know I do this, right? Get like 20 books about the topic. It's like, I'm gonna start learning how to program a computer when I complete these 20 books. No, that's procrastination. What you want to do is learn just enough that you can actually practice and self-correct or self-edit as you practice. So the learning becomes a way of getting better at noticing when you're making a mistake and then doing something a little different. The third is to remove barriers to practice. Distractions, television, internet, all of these things that get in the way of you actually sitting down and doing the work. And the more you're able to use just a little bit of willpower to remove the distractions that are keeping you from practicing, the more likely you are to actually sit down and practice, right? And the fourth is to practice for at least 20 hours. Now, most skills have what I call a frustration barrier. You know, the grossly incompetent knowing it part. That's really, really frustrating. We don't like to feel stupid. And feeling stupid is a barrier to us actually sitting down and doing the work. So by pre-committing to practicing whatever it is that you want to do for at least 20 hours, you will be able to overcome that initial frustration barrier and stick with the practice long enough to actually reap the rewards. All right, that's it. It's not rocket science. 4 very simple steps that you can use to learn anything. Now, this is easy to talk about in theory, but it's more fun to talk about in practice. So one of the things that I've wanted to learn how to do for a long time is play the ukulele. Has anybody seen Jake Shimabukuro's TED Talk where he plays the ukulele and makes it sound like he's like an ukulele god? It's amazing. It's like I saw that. It's like, that is so cool. It's such a neat instrument. I would really like to learn how to play. And so I decided that to test this theory, I wanted to put 20 hours into practicing the ukulele and see where we got. And so the first thing about playing the ukulele is, in order to practice, you have to have one, right? So I got an ukulele, and my lovely assistant. Thank you, sir. I think I need the cord here. It's not just an ukulele, it's an electric ukulele. Yeah. So the first couple hours are just like the first couple hours of anything. You have to get the tools that you're using to practice. You have to make sure that they're available. My ukulele didn't come with strings attached. I had to figure out how to put those on. Like, that's kind of important, right? And learning how to tune and learning how to make sure that all of the things that need to be done in order to start practicing get done, right? Now, one of the things when I was ready to actually start practicing was I looked in online databases and songbooks for how to play songs. And they say, okay, ukuleles, you can play more than one string at a time, so you can play chords. That's cool. You're accompanying yourself. Yay, you. And when I started looking at songs, I had an ukulele chord book that had like hundreds of chords. Looking at the same, like, whoa, that's intimidating.
When I was 6, I started going to work with my grandmother on Friday nights. I'd sit there quietly on a stool, watching her and her colleagues. They sat there shoulder to shoulder. Some would fold things, others would add to the pot. Most were smoking, all were gambling. My grandmother was a professional card player, and she brought me to her card game because I was her good luck charm. What I learned at an early age is that jobs came in all shapes and sizes. At 9, I started working in our family restaurant, Joe's Drive-In, which was neither owned by Joe nor a drive-in. But I worked 3 shifts a week there, prepping, cleaning, frying, baking, all alongside 3 generations of my family. There, I learned that work was a very social experience. Now, you may be wondering about the legality of gambling and child labor. Well, this was Louisiana in the 1970s, so I think it was okay. At 12, I went legit. I thought I was going to be a podiatrist. Don't ask me why. We all have wacky reasons as to why we choose the careers we choose. but I thought I was going to be a podiatrist until that summer. I went to the pool and I saw grown-ups' feet for the first time in real, bold, big life. After that, podiatry, thoughts of podiatry were parts of my past. I went to school for 10 years to become a psychologist. How did I end up there? Well, I always wanted to make people happy. And there was this summer where I binge watched old Bob Newhart episodes. And I thought that was a great career. That's a great career for me. And I became a psychologist after 10 quick years of college. I got out and I was studying what was right with people. So I became a positive psychologist, studying what was right with people. And today I want to talk about the emotional fruits of labor. The emotional fruits of labor. I want to talk about what life gives you when you love your job. And since I've been researching this, I have lived differently. I work differently. And I hope the same happens for you. Now, even though I look for people who love their jobs all the time, I meet people who don't like their jobs quite often. In fact, they have this uncanny ability to find me and sit next to me on long flights. And I learn a lot about the jobs they hate. Now, the reason I think these people talk so much about the jobs they hate is because they're in pain. They're in pain. I know. I've been a job hater. I've been in that pain. You spend a third of your life going to a job that makes you miserable. Going to a job that makes you miserable. And you don't get to do what you do best. You don't get to shine. You don't get praise and recognition. And you work for this boss that you secretly call a soul-sucking happiness vampire. I hope she's not here. And it just drains you. But I also meet a whole lot of people that love their jobs. The first person I ever knew who loved his job was my Uncle Ray. Uncle Ray was just this fascinating enigma to me. He would swoop into our little town of New Iberia, Louisiana, and just change my life. My life would go from black and white to color when Uncle Ray was in town. And he just had this way about him. While other people were talking about jobs they hated and clearing my grandmother's living room, Uncle Ray would captivate us with talk of the travel agent job he loved. So let me tell you a little bit about his job. He started in the travel industry in a job that wasn't all that exotic, it wasn't all that adventurous. He was a customer service agent at a regional airline. A customer service agent at a regional airline. And he didn't get to travel as much as he had hoped. But what he did get was just a ton of experience and a ton of opportunity. And he had one manager that changed his life. The manager said to him, "Ray, you're a people soother. You calm people down." My Uncle Ray built a career and a life out of that one talent, being a people soother. When the airline, National Airlines, shut down, he moved to California, doubled down on his commitment to the travel industry, doubled down on his commitment to what he did best. And while working in an orchard, sought out his next job in travel. He was recruited by the owner of a travel agency, Miss Segali. And Miss Segali recognized Uncle Ray's potential to put people at ease. Ray quickly learned the business. He had no experience planning trips, but he quickly learned the business, and he carved the job into something that was uniquely his. He shaped it little by little, and it became his job. And he would turn hassles of travel into plans for a dream trip. And customers flocked to him. In just a little bit of time, he became one of the top grossing agents at the firm. And then, after 10 years, he was one of the top grossing agents in the country. And he was also named vice president of Segali Travel. I tell you this story about Uncle Ray because he inspired me. He inspired me to look at life as if there was potential, to look at life as if I could make a difference. I could work on my job. I could change my job into something that really meant something to me, that's something that really mattered to me. Now, I believe the best career advice comes from the Rays of the world. And these people really do exist. These people who love their jobs, they really do exist. They pop out of bed in the morning, energized, ready to go. They come home at night still full of energy, ready to share it with their families. These people do exist. They're not mythical creatures like unicorns or jayhawks are Democrats in Western Kansas. They're real. They really do exist. And I want to tell you about the work I've been doing to find these people and discover their secrets. In the last 3 years, I've been working with a huge data set of 8,500 working Americans and trying to figure out exactly how many people in America love their jobs. How many people are having a love affair with their jobs? What do you think? What percentage? You're all wrong. 13%. 13% of people are having a love affair with their jobs. They are uniquely engaged, they are uniquely passionate about what they do. 87% of people are not. 87% of people are not. Who are these people? Who are these people? These are real people. These are artists, these are accountants, teachers, preachers, soldiers, mechanics. These are real people. And they don't have special degrees from special universities. They don't have beautiful, perfect resumes. They're people like you and me. So even I can love my job. Even you can love your job. Now, in researching these people, I started conducting interviews because the data was strong, but I needed data with a soul. So I started asking people about their jobs and getting the stories from them and learning more and more and more each and every day. I've interviewed hundreds of these folks. And I've learned two things. Two things have emerged from their stories of loving their job. Number one, people who love their jobs have great lives. They have great lives. They're off the charts in well-being. They're at the height of happiness. And loving your job is almost an antidote to human suffering. It's almost an antidote to human suffering. When I found that, it just blew me away. That people who love their jobs are thriving, not struggling, not suffering. So the first secret of people who love their jobs is that happiness depends on the goodness of your job. Happiness depends on the goodness of your job. Second, what I found was that these people did not land those jobs they loved. They slowly created those jobs. They designed and built those jobs out of ordinary positions. They just did editing, nudging, and with a lot of effort, turned a reasonably good job into one they could love. So the second secret of people who love their jobs is that love-worthy jobs are made, not found. Love-worthy jobs are made, not found. Now, there's a whole science about loving things, having an affinity for things you make versus things you find. I'm not going to bore you with that. I want to tell you one story, though, that backs up this research. It's a story, an old story, about a motivational psychologist named Ernest Dichter. Ernest Dichter was hired by a company because this new time-saving product wasn't selling as well as they thought it would sell. Brand new time-saving product called the cake mix. The cake mix came into vogue in the 1940s and 50s. And it was selling well, and then the sales flattened. Get it? Cake sales flattened? I do enjoy myself. And then cake sales flattened. And then after a while, the companies asked Ernest Dichter, what's up with these cake sales? Why aren't they continuing to grow as we thought? Well, what Ernest did was he interviewed housewives who were the primary purchasers of cake mixes at the time. And he asked these housewives, why don't you buy more cake mix? And the answer was very interesting. The answer was that it was too easy. These are not my cakes. When I make a cake mix cake, it's not homemade. It's not made by me, it's not made with love. So Ernest went back to the drawing board. He said, okay, all you have to do is pour the contents in the bowl. You have to add water. You mix. You pour the contents into the pan. You pop it in the oven and bake it. What could we change about that process that would invite more mothers to feel like they made something rather than found something? And what was his conclusion? Add an egg. Add an egg. So now, for the last 50 years, we've been adding eggs to our cake mix. Every time we make a cake out of a box, we have to add 1 or 2 eggs. Not because they couldn't add egg powder, which they had in the mix prior, but because we need to make things. We have a drive to make things. We also have a drive to have ownership and autonomy. So I'll ask you a quick question. By clapping, tell me if you've ever rented a car. Clap. Thank Okay, now tell me by clapping if you've ever washed a rental car. All right, so we have these lovely people who have rented cars, and no one, not a single person in this room has ever washed a rental car. Why don't you wash a rental car? You don't own it. It's not yours. Somebody else will take care of it. I already paid for that. Someone else will do it in my stead. That's a renter's approach. And if we have a renter's approach to our jobs, we'll never love our jobs. If we don't make our jobs our own, we'll never take care of them in a way that we can love them. Now's the part of the talk where I'm supposed to inspire you, okay? I'm supposed to tell you this story about how I left my job as a tenured professor to make a bigger difference in people's lives. Wait, I still lose my breath when I say that. Okay, I left my job as a tenured professor to make a bigger difference in people's lives. And it's a great story, but we just don't have time. All right? I should tell you about Joseph Campbell and quote him, this wonderful quote, "Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there are only walls." That's a great quote. I should cite Steve Jobs in his Stanford commencement speech. Find what you love. Find what you love. But I'm not going to quote either of those guys, okay? Because what people who love their jobs tell us is that that advice, while popular, is misleading. It's misleading. So take the Confucian saying, choose a job you love and you will never work a day in your life. Sounds like something that an unemployed philosopher would say. Okay? Choose a job you love. Choose a job you love. It makes it sound like they're just showrooms full of jobs that you would love, and all you have to do is walk in and pick that job, and your life will be much better. But what we know from people who love their jobs is that they take this job that's pretty good and they turn it into something amazing. There's also this wildly popular saying, follow your passion. Follow your passion. That is the most dangerous career advice we could ever give anybody. Follow your passion. There was a study done on people's passions, and they asked people to name the things that make their heart pound. And only 5% of people could name things related to work. 5% could name their passions. But you're supposed to follow your passion to the promised land. But that's just not happening. What people who love their jobs say is that they are full of zest and zeal and passion, but they created it. They created it on the job. All right? So what does that leave us with? What kind of career advice does that give us? Well, people who love their jobs say, you will not land the perfect job. You will perfect the good job you have. You will perfect the good job you have. And that's the advice I want you to hear. And you do that by designing your life. You do that by designing everything about your life so that your job comes to life and the rest of your life is made better. Now, there are 5 life design strategies I want to share with you. The first one is test drive the future. Test drive the future. Second one, trust your gut. Third one, play to your strengths. Fourth, craft your job. And fifth, shop for the right boss, which is my favorite one. We'll come back to that. Test drive your future. You have to get to know your future self so that you can make choices and changes at your job today. You have to do that. And my friend, CEO of a fundraising consulting firm, his name is Patrick Alterdice, he legislates dream time at his office. 30 minutes a week of dream time is mandatory for all of his employees. So he came up with this dream program because he said after people graduate from college, they stop dreaming. So he instituted a dream program whereby you have to commit to your dreams in public, share them with all of your colleagues. Then you consult with a dream manager at work. That's a real job, okay? And then you spend 30 minutes every Friday morning working on your dream. And they don't have to be related to work, all right? And guess what? It's working. People are pursuing their passions. Patrick just came back from Nepal which was part of his dreaming that he engaged in. And other people are pursuing their passions. They're becoming debt-free. They're going back to school. They're starting families. They're doing amazing things, all because of Dream Time. They've changed their jobs and they've changed their lives. And it's boosted engagement, productivity, and well-being at work. Now, the second one is trust your gut. Now, trust your gut can be used when you're first interviewing for a job. And hopefully, when you go into a setting, you're certainly just sensitive to the reactions of the other people in the workplace. But I want you to think about what people who love their jobs said to me. They said that they are surrounded by caring coworkers. Almost every one of these people said they were surrounded by caring coworkers. When I inquired, it came to my realization that didn't happen by accident. What they did was they slowly stopped hanging out with the people they didn't care about and started hanging out more with the people that cared about them. It's a spend versus send strategy that they use, and you can use it at work tomorrow. Spend more face-to-face time with the people that give you the warm fuzzies at work, and send more emails and texts to the people you don't give a damn about. All right? This spend versus send strategy allows you to be civil, but yet get your emotional needs met at work. Now there's playing to your strengths. Play to your strengths. Doing what you do best makes you feel better and makes you work better. Both feeling better and working better. I have a great quote by Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know if you've heard of the guy. Here we go. I could read it in a British accent. Are you ready? I won't do that. We create our lives symbiotically as we explore our talents in relation to the circumstances they helped create for us. Identify your strengths and play to those strengths. And I promise you, your work will become more rewarding for you. Next is job crafting. Craft your job. My friend Amy Rosnewski has developed this whole suite of techniques that you can use to job craft at work. One simple one is to queue up your day in a different way. So while you used to maybe go into work with this willy-nilly approach to your tasks, what if you did all of the most engaging and inspiring tasks first, so that the rest of your day, when you were met with drudgery, you could plow through that? Or what if you reversed that and you went to work and you dealt with all the hassles of the day first and then ended the day on a high note? Either one of those is job crafting. So we can slowly shape our jobs over time to turn them into more rewarding jobs. And the final one is boss shopping, okay? This is something that we can all do, but it's hard. It's really hard. We have to sacrifice some things because there are only 1 in 10 bosses are great bosses. Hear that again. Only 1 in 10 people who are bosses are really great bosses. So we have to shoot for good bosses who get the most out of us and also care about our well-being. And what you need to do is think about shifting and switching maybe the office you work in, the schedule you work, the branch you work at, so that you can get a boss that can get more out of you. I want to tell you a story about Mary, who both trusted her gut and did some boss shopping. Mary applied to every teaching job available to her in driving distance when she graduated from college. And she walked into the buildings with 2 criteria. She wanted warm colleagues and a great boss. And she searched and searched and searched and interviewed at a whole bunch of places, but then she landed at Langley Park McCormick Elementary. And at that school, she found caring colleagues and a boss that just got her. In fact, she told me she called her mom from the car after the interview and said, "Mom, this woman just gets me. I'm going to work for Patricia Kelly." So Mary got the job. She was thrilled. She got the job at Langley Park McCormick Elementary, and things were going wonderful up until the day when she was setting up her classroom, her first grade classroom. She got called to the principal's office, which is never a good thing, even when you're a grown-up. And Patricia Kelly had some bad news for Mary. The enrollment projections were off. There were fewer students going to that school than planned. They had 1 too many teachers. Mary was out of a job. News of this situation spread. Mary's in her classroom packing her boxes back up when a senior colleague comes to her, one of those people who had treated her warmly upon her initial visit, and said, "Mary, I heard about the enrollment numbers. And I want to tell you that the enrollment was higher at another school than projected. So I'm going to take that job because you need to be with Dr. Kelly. You need a great principal, and you can keep your job." Mary has been working for Dr. Patricia Kelly for 25 years. She's a 5th grade teacher now at Westover Elementary, and 2 years ago, she was named the most hopeful teacher in America. Shopping for the right boss pays huge dividends. Now, the central message in Mary's story, and Ray's story, and the story of other vibrant people, happy people who love their jobs is pretty simple. But it should change everything we do to prepare ourselves and others for careers. Happiness depends on the goodness of our jobs, and those good jobs are made, not found. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am a journalist. My job is to talk to people from all walks of life all over the world. Today I want to tell you why I decided to do this with my life and what I've learned. My story begins in Caracas, Venezuela, in South America, where I grew up. A place that to me was and always will be filled with magic and wonder. From a very young age, my parents wanted me to have a wider view of the world. I remember one time when I was around 7 years old, my dad came up to me and said, "Mariana, I'm going to send you and your little sister, who was 6 at the time, to a place where nobody speaks Spanish. I want you to experience different cultures." He went on and on about the benefits of spending an entire summer in this summer camp in the United States, stressing a little phrase that I didn't pay too much attention to at the time: you never know what the future holds. Meanwhile, in my 7-year-old mind, I was thinking we were going to get to summer camp in Miami. Maybe it was going to be even better, and we were going to go a little further north to Orlando, where Mickey Mouse lived. I got really excited. My dad, however, had a slightly different plan. From Caracas, he sent us to Brainerd, Minnesota. Mickey Mouse was not up there. And with no cell phone, no Snapchat or Instagram, I couldn't look up any information. We get there, and one of the first things I noticed was that the other kids' hair was several shades of blonde, and most of them had blue eyes. Meanwhile, this is what we looked like. The first night, the camp director gathered everyone around the campfire and said, "Kids, we have a very international camp this year. The Atencios are here from Venezuela." The other kids looked at us as if we were from another planet. They would ask us things like, "Do you know what a hamburger is?" Or, "Do you go to school in a donkey or a canoe?" I would try to answer in my broken English, and they would just laugh. And I know they were not trying to be mean. They were just trying to understand who we were and make a correlation with the world they knew. We could either be like them or like characters out of a book filled with adventures like Aladdin or The Jungle Book. We certainly didn't look like them. We didn't speak their language. We were different. And when you're 7 years old, that hurts. But I had my little sister to take care of, and she cried every day at summer camp. So I decided to put on a brave face and embrace everything I could about the American way of life. We later did what we called the summer camp experiment for 8 years in different cities that many Americans haven't even heard of. What I remember most about these moments was when I finally clicked with someone. Making a friend was a special reward. Everybody wants to feel valued and accepted, and we think it should happen spontaneously, but it doesn't. When you're different, you have to work at belonging. You have to be either really helpful, smart, funny, anything to be cool for the crowd you want to hang out with. Later on, when I was in high school, my dad expanded on his summer plan, and from Caracas, he sent me to Wallingford, Connecticut for senior year of high school. This time, I remember daydreaming on the plane about the American high school experience with a locker. It was going to be perfect, just like in my favorite TV show, Saved by the Bell. I get there, and they tell me that my assigned roommate is eagerly waiting. I open the door, and there she was, sitting on the bed with a headscarf. Her name was Fatima, and she was Muslim from Bahrain, and she was not what I expected. She probably sensed my disappointment when I looked at her because I didn't do too much to hide it. See, as a teenager, I wanted to fit in even more. I wanted to be popular and maybe have a boyfriend for prom. And I felt that Fatima just got in the way with her shyness and her strict dress code. I didn't realize that I was making her feel like the kids at summer camp made me feel. This was the high school equivalent of asking her, "Do you know what a hamburger is?" I was consumed by my own selfishness and unable to put myself in her shoes. I have to be honest with you. We only lasted a couple of months together because she was later sent to live with a counselor instead of other students. And I remember thinking, she'll be okay. She's just different. You see, when we label someone as different, it dehumanizes them in a way. They become the other. They're not worthy of our time, not our problem, and in fact, they, the other, are probably the cause of our problems. So how do we recognize our blind spots? It begins by understanding what makes you different, by embracing those traits. Only then can you begin to appreciate what makes others special. And I remember when this hit me, it was a couple of months after that. I had found that boyfriend for prom and made a group of friends and practically forgotten about Fatima until everybody signed on to participate in this talent show for charity. You needed to offer a talent for auction, and it seemed like everybody had something special to offer. Some kids were going to play the violin, others were going to recite a theater monologue. And I remember thinking, we don't practice talents like these back home. But I was determined to find something of value. So the day of the talent show comes, and I get up on stage with my little boombox, I put it on the side, and I press play, and a song by my favorite emerging artist, Shakira, comes up. And I go, "Whenever, wherever, we're meant to be together." And I said, "My name is Mariana, and I'm gonna auction a dance class." And it seemed like the whole school raised their hand to bid. My dance class really stood out from like the 10th violin class offered that day. And going back to my dorm room, I didn't feel different. I felt really special. And that's when I started thinking about Fatima, the person that I had failed to see as special when I first met her. She was from the Middle East, just like Shakira's family was from the Middle East. She could have probably taught me a thing or two about belly dancing, had I been open to it. Now, I want you all to take that sticker that was given to you at the beginning of our session today, where you wrote down what makes you special, and I want you to look at it. If you're watching at home, take a piece of paper and write down what makes you different. You may feel guarded when you look at it, maybe even a little ashamed, maybe even proud. But you need to begin to embrace it. Remember, it is the first step in appreciating what makes others special. When I went back home to Venezuela, I began to understand how these experiences were changing me. Being able to speak different languages, to navigate all these different people and places, it gave me a unique sensibility. I was finally beginning to understand the importance of putting myself in other people's shoes. And that is a big part of the reason why I decided to become a journalist. especially being from a part of the world that is often labeled the backyard, the illegal aliens, third world, the others. I wanted to do something to change that. It was right around the time, however, when the Venezuelan government shut down the biggest television station in our country. Censorship was growing, and my dad came up to me once again and said, "How are you going to be a journalist here? You have to leave." And that's when it hit me. That's what he had been preparing me for. That is what the future held for me. So in 2008, I packed my bags and I came to the United States without a return ticket this time. I was painfully aware that at 24 years old, I was becoming a refugee of sorts, an immigrant, the other, once again, and now for good. I was able to come on a scholarship to study journalism. And I remember when they gave me my first assignment to cover the historic election of President Barack Obama. And I felt so lucky, so hopeful. I was like, yes, this is it. I've come to post-racial America, where the notion of us and them is being eroded and will probably be eradicated in my lifetime. Boy, was I wrong, right? Why didn't Barack Obama's presidency alleviate racial tensions in our country? Why do some people still feel threatened by immigrants, LGBTQ, and minority groups who are just trying to find a space in this United States that should be for all of us? I didn't have the answers back then. But on November 8th, 2016, when Donald Trump became our president, it became clear that a large part of the electorate sees them as the others. Some see people coming to take their jobs or potential terrorists who speak a different language. Meanwhile, minority groups oftentimes just see hatred, intolerance, and narrow-mindedness on the other side. It's like we're stuck in these bubbles that nobody wants to burst. And the only way to do it, the only way to get out of it, is to realize that being different also means thinking differently. It takes courage to show respect. In the words of Voltaire, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to say it. Failing to see anything good on the other side makes a dialogue impossible. Without a dialogue, we will keep repeating the same mistakes because we will not learn anything new. I covered the 2016 election for NBC News. It was my first big assignment in this mainstream network where I had crossed over from Spanish television. And I wanted to do something different. I watched election results with undocumented families. Few thought of sharing that moment with people who weren't citizens, but actually stood the most to lose that night. When it became apparent that Donald Trump was winning, this 8-year-old girl named Angelina rushed up to me in tears. She sobbed as she asked me if her mom was going to be deported now. I hugged her back and I said it's going to be okay. But I really didn't know. This was the photo that we took that night, forever ingrained in my heart. Here was this little girl who was around the same age I was when I went to camp in Brainerd. She already knows she is the other. She walks home from school in fear every day. Her mom can be taken away. So how do we put ourselves in Angelina's shoes? How do we make her understand she is special and not simply unworthy of having her family together? By giving camera time to her and families like hers, I tried to make people see them as human beings and not simply illegal aliens. Yes, they broke a law, and they should pay a penalty for it, but they've also given everything for this country, like many other immigrants before them have. I've already told you how my path to personal growth started. To end, I want to tell you how I hit the worst bump in the road yet, one that shook me to my very core. The day, April 10th, 2014. I was driving to the studio and I got a call from my parents. "Are you on the air?" they asked. I immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" I said. it's your sister. She's been in a car accident. It was as if my heart stopped. My hands gripped to the steering wheel, and I remember hearing the words, "It is unlikely she will ever walk again." They say your life can change in a split second. Mine did at that moment. My sister went from being my successful other half, only a year apart in age, to not being able to move her legs, sit up, or get dressed by herself. And this wasn't like summer camp where I could magically make it better. This was terrifying. Throughout the course of 2 years, my sister underwent 15 surgeries, and she spent most of that time in a wheelchair. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The worst was something so painful, it's hard to put into words even now. It was the way people looked at her, looked at us, changed. People were unable to see a successful lawyer or a millennial with a sharp wit and a kind heart. Everywhere we went, I realized that people just saw a poor girl in a wheelchair. They were unable to see anything beyond that. After fighting like a warrior, I can thankfully tell you that today my sister is walking and has recovered beyond anyone's expectations. Thank you. But during that traumatic ordeal, I learned there are differences that simply suck, and it's hard to find positive in them. My sister's not better off because of what happened. But she taught me you can't let those differences define you. Being able to reimagine yourself beyond what other people see, that is the toughest task of all, but it's also the most beautiful. You see, we all come to this world in a body. People with physical or neurological difficulties, environmentally impacted communities, immigrants, boys, girls, boys who want to dress as girls, girls with veils, women who've been sexually assaulted, athletes who bend their knee as a sign of protest, Black, white, Asian, Native American, my sister, you or me. We all want what everyone wants, to dream and to achieve. But sometimes society tells us, and we tell ourselves, we don't fit the mold. Well, if you look at my story, from being born somewhere different, to belly dancing in high school, to telling stories you wouldn't normally see on TV, what makes me different is what has made me stand out and be successful. I have traveled the world and talked to people from all walks of life. And you know what I've learned? The single thing every one of us has in common is being human. So take a stand to defend your race, the human race. Let's appeal to it. Let's be humanists before and after everything else. To end, I want you to take that sticker, that piece of paper where you wrote down what makes you different, and I want you to celebrate it today and every day. Shout it from the rooftops. I also encourage you to be curious and ask, what is on other people's pieces of paper? What makes them different? Let's celebrate those imperfections that make us special. I hope that it teaches you that nobody has a claim on the word normal. We are all different. We are all quirky and unique, and that is what makes us wonderfully human. Thank you so much.
My story starts in Moscow. I was 15 years old. My best friend and I, we were part of a group of Westerners visiting the Soviet Union. This was in 1987, a few years before the fall of the communist regime.